Vikings may have been known as the ultra-violent raiders of most of Europe.
But beneath the muscular, hairy exterior, we find artistic, fun-loving people who did much more than just be a Viking. I'm your host, Big Chetty.
And I'm just Adam Andrews, and this is the top 10 messed up jobs that Vikings had.
Ooh.
Number 10, Thrall Traders. Now look, Vikings weren't all that bad. Sure, they would go off to other countries and lands and raid and pillage for a bit of sport. They'd de-life you and your family, or they would take the people from your village that could do some good manual labor and bring them back to the market where they were sold to other Vikings as thralls. But okay, you know what? Yeah, I'm not really making this any better. The selling and purchasing of actual people has unfortunately been a successful business strategy in almost every single corner of the world for as long as there have been people to do it. And the Vikings were not exempt from this. While it was a standard way of living at the time, the people who actually auctioned off thralls for silver and gold pieces, or for goods like furs, weapons, livestock, and food, by our standards, were the worst of people. To make the life of another human being nothing more than a product is pretty disgusting. Gotta love how people just always treat each other so nicely. Life for a Viking thrall was anything but pleasant, but they were a part of Viking society. We'll get to that later though.
Number 9, hunters. Yes, a lot of Scandinavian life had domesticated animals. We wouldn't be here without that. But this isn't the time of industrial agriculture. You can't just walk into your local butcher and demand to speak to the manager when there's a lack of product. Trouble is, I think a lot of modern folks just don't know how difficult the process of hunting can be. Now, hunting is a way of R&R, a unique hobby that can give you a respect of nature and where your food comes from. Or it's a way to binge drink in a small cabin with 3 other men trying to get away from their wives. Vikings just didn't have it that easy. No catch, no food. For my taste though, in a time before gunpowder and rifles, stick to the small animals. Trying to take down a bear with arrows, that just can't be easy.
Number 8, shipbuilders. Vikings got around. All around, not just Europe, but a large part of the known world, even discovering places all by themselves. They were experts at building boats. They had dragon ships, gnars, merchant ships, and a whole bunch of other kinds of water vehicles. But the most famous of all their ships would be their longboats. They used longboats to travel the world and to go on their famous vacations when they would go Viking. The dudes responsible for building these things are also responsible for the nightmares they gave all the monks and soldiers who lived in England and other European countries, assuming they survived. Imagine, it's a nice, crisp morning. You're just waking up for the long day ahead of you. You step outside to take it all in. Oh, what's that in the distance? A large, flat-bottomed oak boat with the head of a serpent or a dragon, with 50 to 60 large, hairy, sweaty, angry-looking men who are coming to put you in the ground or kidnap you, take your stuff, and burn your house to the ground? You know who you have to thank for this? Yeah, it's the Viking shipbuilder.
Number 7, blacksmith. Being a blacksmith is a very difficult task. Red-hot iron, hammers striking and forging the metal that makes our lives possible. Sure, we don't use them as much as we did in the past, but someone's gotta make horseshoes. Shout out to all the equine lovers out there. I see you. The point I'm getting to here is that in a time before power hammers and modern techniques, it's a long process. Takes time and skill. Some might even call blacksmithing an artisan craft, especially since a lot of the things that required a blacksmith to be a blacksmith, like making swords obviously, and shields and spears, but you gotta think about everything else. Door hinges, iron fittings, bolts, brackets. It's an important job in the Iron Age. What's messed up is how dangerous it is. Anyone working with metal will tell you how rough that can be. In a time before hospitals, burn treatments, and antibiotics, I would be careful on the grind wheel.
Number 6, settlers. Life in the Scandinavian countries was not easy. Summers were like 2 days long, and winters would last so long Andrew could actually move his box over to finish filming on time.
Hey!
A large percent of the Vikings were farmers, but the soil there was not good. So, as more and more Vikings were born and families grew, some people decided to jump ship and move away. Or try to. They'd show up in England like, "Hi, so I know we kinda just like totally raided you or whatever, but we would love your land and we're gonna settle here, okay? Cool." This was usually met with the pointy end of a 3-foot sword. They would settle in areas like Britain, the Netherlands, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, and Russia. Some successfully, some not so much. They did successfully settle Iceland and Greenland though, with their population in Iceland reaching like 50,000. When they went to Vinland, otherwise known as Newfoundland, they settled for about 5 minutes before the Native Americans drove them out. Being a settler back in the time of the Viking was a necessity for some, but a death wish for most.
Number 5, Fletcher. I used to be an adventurer like you until I took an arrow to the knee. Somebody had to make these bad boys. Archery. It was an important part of medieval life. Just look at the long bowmen of England. They'll tell you. Bows and arrows may not be the first thing you think of when talking about Vikings, but judging from text, art, and other evidence suggests that archery played a major role in Viking life. Chances are, if you saw a longboat coming into your shores, there would be some burly blonde-haired dudes with bows ready to find their targets. There's a part of me that thinks this is one time the player can blame the controller, or the arrows for that matter. Not every arrow is going to be perfect, so if something goes wrong, you can go back to base and yell at Youngrold.
Number 4. Law speaker. So, in Viking life there were some rules and laws that applied to all Vikings, and some that were specific to each village or town. But they didn't have law books. There wasn't any kind of written law at all. No, instead, one lad from each town would go have the special task of being the law speaker. This was one person in town who would have the lovely job of memorizing every naughty thing that the members of the village weren't allowed to do. When a council meeting, which was literally called a thing, took place, he was there to remind everyone of any law that was forgotten or to listen and memorize new laws that were made. Then he would waltz on down to the village law rock and recite that law to everyone who was not part of the thing. Now, imagine if you forgot a law, or if you worded it differently and that caused someone to find a loophole, or imagine if you were someone who the law speaker didn't like. That guy could mess up your whole day. If the punishment for a crime was not death, it was sure damn close enough, being exiled into the cold, harsh wilderness. Look, the Vikings came into contact with enough cultures who made a habit of writing things down. Get with the program.
Number 3, Thrall. Hey, I don't like it. Nobody likes it. It's YouTube's least favorite S word, forced manual labor, or you know what I'm talking about. Vikings were kind of twisted in that department, honestly. Like Adam said, sometimes for fun, they take you away for some good old-fashioned manual labor. Also, like Adam said, this was a very successful and profitable business strategy. If there weren't laws that made employers pay a minimum wage, well, I'd hate to see a world without those laws, you know what I'm saying? It's a terrible thing to find yourself in. While there were some sort of sick buyback freedom program going on, the thrall system does echo with serfdom in the rest of Europe, which if you look around, isn't around anymore. Probably for good reason.
Number 2, traders. Vikings weren't just mindless brutes who would run around plunging their axes and swords into people, getting drunk and wearing little to no clothing. I mean, yes, there was a fair share of that, but they were also very handy, excellent craftsmen and explorers. As they grew, some towns became trading centers, importing and exporting goods from lands far away. Through Russia, Vikings came into contact with Chinese and Persian traders who gave them spices and fine silks and amber. They would barter with things like weapons, furs, walrus ivory, and fish. They managed to get wine from France and Germany. But while these Vikings decided to trade in the danger of robbing for a more diplomatic profession, they still had to travel. And while they may be making hella bank, that doesn't really matter when you and your longboat carrying all your goods ends up at the bottom of the ocean. Like we said earlier in the video, Vikings were amazing boat builders, but they were not masters of the elements. And if Thor decides it's time for a storm, or if pirates got you in their sights, you gotta deal with the consequences.
Number 1, beekeeping. I'll admit it, I may be a cute husky guy who reminds people of other overweight comedians. I love Candy and Farley too, and maybe sometimes I fart too much. But as it turns out, I have some fears too. I know, who would have thought? One thing I'm not cool with is flying insects, especially the ones that can hurt you. I don't like those ones. Bees and wasps, ironic, I know, my little honeybees, I know, right? Who would have thought? I've never been stung before and I don't plan on it. With my luck, Adam's a supervillain with thousands of bees at his disposal. Who knows? With all jokes aside, the Vikings had honey, which probably means they had some sort of beekeeping going on. We're not sure, however, how they did it. What I do know, though, is that they had no protection or smoke blowers. Maybe they did. Tell you what, I'll enjoy the honey and let the crazy burly men take care of the harvesting. Well, that's been some messed up jobs that the Vikings had.
Good thing we're wrapping up. I have some non-supervillain bee related things to attend to. So make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here at Bumblebee.
Yes, and maybe pop on over and check out our Facebook page. And if you too wish to have an arrow in the knee, then check out our socials linked down below. It's somewhere down there, I think. I've been one of your hosts, Chetty.
And I've been your other host, Adam Andrews.
Bye.
Bye.
Stay sweet, honeybees. Bye.
Bye. God,
It's one of those days again. I might poo.
Bad.
I gotta be more centered because Ryan said if I'm not centered, he'd hurt my family. If I'm not more centered, he'd hurt my family. So I gotta be centered. That's why you can't move it. That's why you gotta move it up.
You want me to move it up?
Yeah, so it's gotta be centered because Ryan said he'd hurt my family.